Hello, and welcome to the Plebdevs tutorial for HTML and CSS. So I'm Austin. I do a lot of the content here with Plebdevs, and normally I do longer form educational content. But for this, I just wanted to give you a 15-minute video if you haven't written any code before. I wanted to give you a chance in 15 minutes to start writing, really building your first website with the most primitive tools that you need to do that, which is HTML and CSS. So this is a great place to start your coding journey. And yeah, we're gonna go through it real quick here. So for reference, Plebdevs has 2 courses. This is from plebdevs.com. And this first course right here, Lightning Wallet Frontend, all of the material I'm going to cover today is actually covered in much more depth in this course right here. This will take you from no coding experience to writing a Lightning Wallet frontend on your own. So that's pretty cool. But today we're just going to go over the basics just so you can get started and get your hands dirty and maybe build a cool website to show your friends. Sweet. So starting off, you're going to want to open up all 3 of these links in a new tab. This first one here, this is replit.com, and this is where we're going to be writing our code. It's just basically a coding environment in the browser. It's a lot easier to set up than something that you're going to install locally. Next, we have W3 Schools here. So these are the docs for HTML and the docs for CSS. This is going to basically have all the reference that you need once you start to dig deeper or you don't remember something on how to write HTML and how to write CSS. And so I actually already have these tabs open along with this slideshow here. And I'll be sure to include all of these links down below in the description. Okay, cool. So with those open, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to log into Replit and you're going to create a new HTML, CSS, and JavaScript REPL. So I can show you what that looks like here. I've got my Replit open. I'm already logged in. And there's a lot going on here, but I can just click Create REPL, and I'll scroll down to the templates here, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And let me zoom in a little bit for you. And I can make it public or private, and it'll just give it a default name here. So that's fine. So we'll create this, and it will start us out here with a template. Okay, so there's already going to be some code here, but don't worry, we're going to understand exactly what this does very soon. Sweet. So what are we starting with? This is what we're starting with. And so sometimes developers, we might call this a boilerplate or a template. It's basically just a starting point for our project to where we can immediately just start to write the content, and we don't need to do any setup or configuration first. So that's pretty nice. But let's start from the beginning here. What is HTML and what is CSS? Really simply, so HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a standard markup language for creating web pages. What that really means by markup is that we're taking this content that's static, it's this content that doesn't change, and we're just laying it out so that our browser will know how to render it. CSS, on the other hand, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, is the language used to style the HTML document, right? So that's why I have these pictures here down below. I think it's a good analogy. We have, the structure of a house, the bones of the house here, which kind of represents the HTML. And then the CSS comes along and it pulls the structure together and adds styles, the painting, the window frames, all of that. And so it kind of makes your house look complete. And so that's sort of how HTML and CSS work together. And what we're going to learn very basically here is the HTML tags and their functions. So that's the code we were just seeing a second ago. We're going to learn how to build the structure of a web page with HTML. We're going to learn how to integrate CSS to enhance the appearance and basically style it. And then we're going to get some quick tips for laying out our pages with CSS in a little bit more sophisticated ways. Cool. So basic HTML structure. So we see this in our template that we already opened up. At the top, we have this doc type tag here. And this is basically just specifying the doc type as HTML. So, nothing much to say there. That's just a part of the setup or the boilerplate that we have. Next, we actually have the HTML tag, which will enclose literally everything. Everything that we are going to write on our website is going to fit inside of this HTML tag. And so notice that this tag, we have this we have it on the top here, and then we have it on the bottom. And so this is actually an opening tag, and this is a closing tag. So the closing tag has this slash here at the beginning, which is how we kind of tell. So tags, they have an opening and the closing. We can also see that they nest inside of each other, right? So they open, they close, and then they nest inside of each other. And that's basically HTML right there. Going down, we have the head, and the head of our HTML is important. It's actually where we store the metadata. So anything that we put inside of the head, it doesn't necessarily render to the screen, but it's more of like the title that will show up in the tab. Like for example, where it says title goes here. That's like these titles I have up at the top of my tabs right here. So it's not anything that'll actually render on the page. It's more of just metadata around it. Oops. Cool. And so inside of our head, you know, we're just putting the title here for right now. But the body section, that's where our actual page content will go. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time, is filling in this body section here. And of course, we basically already have this boilerplate set up here. So now we kind of understand what's going on there. So let's talk about adding content. So I'm going to show you a few tags here that we're going to use to add content. So we have our heading tag, which might be H1, it might be H2, H3. These are basically different types of header text sizes that we can put in. And then we have the classic P tag here, which stands for paragraph, which is basically just any kind of basic text that you're going to render on the page. And we also have an image here. There's an image tag right here that we're going to put in. And this image tag has some different stuff going on with it. So we see these additional values inside of the image tag, which is source and width. And these are called attributes, right? So all HTML tags, they have attributes. And these attributes, they just add to or modify the behavior of the tags. So in this case, for the image tag, we have to have these attributes where this source is pointing towards a URL which has the image. And then of course the width is just the width that we decide to render the image. So there's all sorts of attributes. The docs that I shared up front will give you all the information you need on that. You know, we don't need to memorize all of this. We just want to get our hands dirty and get a web page down, and then we'll have it forever as a reference, and we can kind of build on what we've done before. So I am going to actually click into this little part right here. So this is actually real code, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put this as my new body right here, and I'll save that, and I can run it, and our content is rendering. Sweet. So we have about me, some text. This is one of our headers, another header, and then of course our funny picture. So it seems to work. All right, so a little bit more concept here. We're going to talk about the div and semantic HTML. So these are some fancy terms that you might hear as you're learning HTML. So understanding the div, so a container element used to group HTML elements. So we talked before about how HTML becomes nested. Well, there's a lot of times where you need to have a container that's maybe your header or your footer or something like that. And maybe your header at the top of your page, it has a bunch of buttons and you need to put them in a row. So you kind of end up with containers inside of containers, and it can get very messy very quickly. And so this is why we have semantic HTML. Okay, so the div here is the basic unnamed container, but we have semantic HTML tags right here, which are also basically divs, but they just have names that help with SEO, accessibility, and maintenance and all of that stuff. So we have like a header, footer, article, section, nav. And so this is just something that you might see inside of your HTML as you're writing it, that people try and describe what the container represents for the content that they're putting inside of it. Okay, and we're going to use a little bit of that here. I kind of refactored our existing HTML to be a little bit more semantic. So I will once again grab this and copy it. We'll move over to our text editor and replace our body. Sweet. So now our body we have our body container with a header inside of it. There's a main content section, which has what we originally had before, just our picture and our about me. And then we have a footer. So let's click the run button again. Sweet. And so now we see there's, kind of a header here. There's sort of a footer. It doesn't look very good. It's all very plain still. But that's all well and good because we're getting the content to render. So now let's get into styling this. So we've written a little bit of HTML. Now let's dive into CSS. So what is CSS? It's a style sheet language used to describe the presentation of a document written in HTML, right? So, with HTML, we're very naively just kind of throwing these pieces of content onto the page. And these pieces of content, they have default styles. But what we can do with CSS is kind of go in and surgically style and shape and color all of the HTML that we're putting down on the page. So so the functionality here, CSS allows for the styling, and it also allows for more specific layouts here and positioning of elements, which might be necessary for our footer or our header. Another thing it does is CSS separates the content and the presentation. So it keeps the presentation style of pages separate from the content, and that improves accessibility and it offers more flexibility. And you'll see in the future, as you start writing more code, it can make it a little bit easier to manage all of the code. So one final thing I'll say about CSS, and this is where the rabbit hole really begins with CSS, is what cascading means. So CSS rules cascade, meaning that the priority of rules determines which styles are applied to elements. This cascade combines styles from various sources, like browser default styles, developer-defined styles, into a final layout. So what that really means is we're defining all of these styles, but these styles are kind of determining and competing based on how specific they are, which ones get applied. Now, I know that may not make sense right now, but you will start to see it make sense in further lessons once we have to style more and more elements in more specific ways. But for right now, we can define a very basic style, just like this one right here, where we have what's called a selector. So this is a P. So this is selecting every single P tag from our HTML page. And then we wrap it in curly brackets, just like that. And then we have a property and a property value separated by a colon and then ending with a semicolon. And here, obviously, we're just saying that the color is red. So pretty simple. So there's different properties like color, and those different properties will have different values like red. We might have a property like width, and width may be able to be 200 pixels, or it may be able to be 20%, right? So there's all sorts of different values that you can apply to make things super custom. Okay, so we kind of saw what CSS looks like, but how does this connect into the HTML? Well, looking back at our boilerplate that we got here, there was something special inside of the head. So remember, the head of our HTML is just the metadata. We have this link here, this link tag, which is linking to style.css. It's telling us it's a style sheet, and then it has a type of text CSS, right? So this is actually linking in the style.css, which is inside of our code editor. So I can jump over to here to style.css right here. I see that there's already a predefined style. It's very basic. It just is height and width 100%. But because I've linked it right here, all of the styles from here will apply into our HTML document. So that's how you link them. Okay, so we see how the styles are connected. We kind of know what the structure of a style is, but let's add our first style ourselves. So you can copy this once again, and we'll put it down here and I'll walk you through it. So this is targeting the header tag, right? If we go back in HTML, we see there's a header tag here. So this is targeting all the header tags, and we're telling it to have this background color. We're actually able to define it as a hex code here. We could also just put, like black, and that would be just as valid, but you know, we're fancy here, so we're going to use a hex code. This color here is saying what color the text will be. We've got padding, which is just extra spacing that you can add. So 20 pixels of padding to just give it some breathing room there. And then we can align the text to center. Right, so this is how all the CSS properties are. You know, it can maybe be a little bit hard to remember, but they're very simple. And you can always find all of these inside of the CSS doc. So I highly suggest that once you're done with this, you just take it and start styling it and trying things and make a crazy looking web page. Okay, so let's run this, and we can see right here, we kind of got a header now. It's a different color. Background color is dark gray, and we've got white text, and we see our spacing in there. So that's pretty nice. Okay, so next, the final bit of, I guess, theory that I'm going to introduce to you is Flexbox. So this is a way that we can, using an easy syntax, lay out our elements a little bit easier. So positioning elements can be pretty difficult with CSS sometimes. Think of my example earlier of you having a nav bar, and you have buttons in those nav bar. In that nav bar, you know, are those buttons supposed to be spread apart evenly? Are they all supposed to sit over to the left, but maybe with a little bit of space in between them? So these are the kinds of things that can get really gross with CSS, but Flexbox helps us with this. We can add a simple command, display flex, and this allows us to choose a flex direction here of either row or of column, which will have it going side to side or up and down. We can then add another tag here to justify the content. Do we want it to be to this at the start, kind of shifting to the left or to the right? Do we want it to be spaced between or spaced around, spaced evenly? And then finally, we have alignment from the top or the bottom. So maybe we have our header, we have our buttons, they're spaced, but should they sit at the bottom of the footer? Should they sit at the top of the footer? So these are things that Flexbox will help you do much easier. Okay, so now let's actually just add all the CSS that I kind of set up for this basic web page. And then we'll review it once again and kind of look over what we've learned. And that should set you up to kind of go off running yourself. So I'm just gonna cover all of this. I'm gonna paste in, this is our first slide of CSS. And then there's gonna be one more slide. And I'll just put that at the bottom here and save it. Okay, quite a bit going on. Let's see what it looks like. Look at that. We have our full header now, our full footer. Everything is lined up and centered. It kind of looks like a website. It kind of does. And so looking over our HTML here, you can see very simply we're just targeting these different tags and we're applying the styles to them. So like in our main container, which has our content, this has a max width of 800 pixels. That's why there's kind of space here on the side. We have some more padding here. We're using flex to kind of stretch things out. And you see right here where we define on the whole body that we're displaying flex. And then we're gonna put everything into a column. Adding some more colors here. Adding max width on the image. Background color, padding. So you see a lot of these styles are very similar. And a lot of times there's a lot of different styles that you can add, but you know, 80% of the time we're actually just using 20% of these styles, like margin and padding and stuff like that. So you'll notice that with your time with CSS. Okay, but one last thing I want to show you. We can open a new tab here for our web page. We see it here, and I can right click and go to inspect. And then you can see the inspector up here. Let's zoom in. And there's this little button right here at the top. If I click on this, I can now hover over all of the elements in our HTML page and see all the details on them. And in fact, I can see when I hover, I can see the margin, I can see the padding. And if I click on it, then it will kind of, this window's a little bit messy, but it'll show us the full markdown. And then it'll show us the styles that are applied here. And we can actually like check and uncheck these styles. Like I can get rid of this padding, and we see that, there's kind of a little bit less space there. So this is a good way to kind of tinker around and see how your web page is fitting together as you build it. But okay, cool. So we just learned the absolute bare minimum to start building a basic web page here. So I hope that you take this and start running with it. And I definitely invite you to check out plebdevs.com, the courses. And even better yet, you can join the Plebdevs community here, and you can come personally ask me questions and ask me for help. And I would love to come help you, especially if you're writing some of your first code. So sweet, first tutorial. Look out for more on the way, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.